Wagwan, y'all. It's Dimz, and today let's have a little discussion. Let's discuss my feelings on Rivals of Aether 2, or as it's now known as Rivals 2. I don't know how long I'm gonna make this video, since I'm just discussing my feelings on what I think and what I would want them to do right, and how I think everything's going from all the information that we have now since the inception of the release trailer. But, feel free to tab out or, just put me in the background. But let's just get started. So let's just ask the first question. What is Rivals of Aether? Well, Rivals of Aether is an indie platform fighter that is spearheaded by Dan Fornance, the now creator and CEO of Aether Studios. Also, if I ever mention Dan or Dan Fornance, just know that I'm really talking about the whole studio. He is the public face of Aether Studios, so it's easier just to say Dan. So if I do that, I really mean the whole studio. What is a platform fighter? Well, it's a game sort of like Smash Bros. Smash Brothers or Super Smash Brothers had created the genre with its unique take on a fighting game, and it has taken the hearts of other people, so now people are making games similar to it. And now it's under the moniker or the genre platform fighter. So Rivals of Aether became a little indie platform fighter that could. And it was one of the first ones, and based on who you're talking about, the only ones to make its own or make out its own place in this niche genre that can stand beside Smash Bros. Nowadays, we have a lot of platform fighters, but none of them has really caught the fire or made its own community and just solidified itself as much as Rivals of Aether compared to Smash Brothers. There is a lot of reasons why a lot of platform fighters struggle to solidify themselves and, just etch out a place and etch out a niche inside of this niche for themselves. But against a lot of odds, Rivals of Aether was able to do that, especially compared to a lot of these newer platform fighters that has a lot more going for them than Rivals of Aether did at its inception. Which kudos to Rivals of Aether, because there's a lot wrong you can do when making a platform fighter. And, it's just anyone making a new platform fighter nowadays is going to be compared to Smash Bros. Whether they're not as polished as Smash Bros, whether they don't have a lot of similar mechanics to Smash Bros, maybe they're too similar to Smash Bros, and it says, why would you play this over Smash Bros? So having yourself etch out a niche is really, really difficult, especially when you want to solidify a new community and just add on to the genre of platform fighters. And it's not like Rivals of Aether is without faults. They did a lot of things right. They did a few things wrong. They probably just came out at the perfect time or were just in the right place at the right time. There's, who can say? But all I can say is another game coming out the way Rivals of Aether did at its time probably would not be successful if it took the same trajectory that Rivals of Aether had took at the time. You might, that's probably not going to work twice. And also, just for the record, Rivals of Aether is my favorite platform fighter in the genre currently. So I really have high hopes for the sequel, especially I don't want them to stumble on some things I feel like they stumbled on the first one. You know what? Let's start off with talking about what I feel like Rivals of Aether did correctly. Let's see. Rivals of Aether, when it was even in its inception, was inspired by Smash Brothers, specifically Super Smash Bros. Melee. You can see that in its DNA, and you can see it in the way it plays. But they took that inspiration and kind of made it its own, as well as trying to skirt around a few technical difficulties. Because of the game engine and because of the coding skills of the team at the time and the game engine of GameMaker, they said that they couldn't really, or it was either difficult to get shielding and edge mechanics working correctly. So instead of, trying to make shielding a thing, which, they can do now, they decided to just go in a different direction. There was going to be no shields, and there was going to be no direct edge play, as in there's no going to be no hanging on the edge. Or ledge, not edge. So there was no ledge holds at all, and there was no shields, which it made the game unique for platform fighters. It made it actually more aggressive, since the normal rock paper scissors of attack shield grab was out. Because they couldn't get shields working, Dan had said, well, let's not have traditional grabs either. So all you really have is parries and attacks, and also rolls and dodges. This made the game really faster because it inherently is more aggressive, since your defensive options, while good, are limited, and they are very, very specific in their usage. You can't hold parry the whole game, or else you will lose. Like, unlike holding shield, which can be a really good benefit for you in defensive play. You cannot play on the ledge the whole game because you'll run out of ledge resources, and it will lead to you being in severe disadvantage. Versus other games where ledge play, it can be a very, very strong very, very strong factor for specific characters. And you can't just always maybe stay in the air and just air camp someone, because not a lot of characters in this game can do that, and your dodges are not that great. It really turned into a really fun, fast game, and not only because of those options, but because of the characters themselves. The mechanical character design in Rivals of Aether is honestly something akin to a MOBA. I feel like every character has their passive, let's say passive goal. Like, every character isn't run up in your face and punch you. They have a lot of passive and active ways of just playing around the battlefields and objectives that they want to complete to make their self better at fighting the opponent. Let's take Daedalus for an example. Daedalus is a big body attacker. He can spread ice, and he can just, attack you with large and giant hits. One of his passive traits is when he spreads ice, he can slide on the ice. Only Daedalus can slide on this ice. So it will inherently make him faster by just sliding around the battlefield. This means you have a passive objective to spread your ice as much as possible so you can make yourself faster, which in turn makes you more effective in attacking your opponent. But at the same time, the more ice you have on the battlefield, the more options you have. You have an option to break all the ice on the battlefield and ensnare your foe. Or you even have an option to use the ice to give yourself more armor, so that you are less susceptible of getting hit with something huge and just going flying into the blast zone. This is just really, really good design, and every single character on the roster has a design like this with side objectives or passive objectives that just, if you complete them, makes their gameplay better. But it's not required that you do it every single time. It's only required to as much as you think or as much as you feel like the situation calls for. Not only do these make the characters unique, but it inherently gives so much player expression to see what types of players prioritize what kind of actions that their character can do. Or, if they even go for these side objectives at all, whether it fits their gameplay or, just that whole thing just opens up, and it opens up wide just to see how two of the same characters fighting each other in the mirror match just prioritize different things or does different things to fight each other. It's thrilling while also keeping the game still simple. Let's see. Another thing that I feel like Rivals or Aether Studios did right was developer support. it seemed that they really cared about the people that played their games, and it really seemed like they cared about the game themselves, with continuous updates where it's needed, as well as support for the competitive scene, and just little tweaks and just little things here and there to make sure everything stays, let's say, balanced as possible, and just make sure everything doesn't fall apart. And, they were there again in their competitive scene. They pushed hard for it, and they just kept a steady stream going, which is great when you do have a competitive scene. And not for nothing, the game just feels really good to control and play. That is my biggest great thing I can say about this game. It does feel good. It doesn't feel clunky, and there's so many accessible options so that you can play with different style of controllers. And it's really just, everything just feels good. Everything just works. And I do like that. But enough singing praises. Let's throw in some criticism. What did Rivals of Aether do wrong? Or as I feel that they did wrong? First and foremost, one thing I think that they did wrong that I hope they don't do again is I feel like they catered too much to the competitive scene. I feel like the game was created to be competitive before it was created for everyone. What do I mean by that, you may ask? Well, I feel like the game was too focused and too tailored to competitive play that it narrowed the net of people that it could capture with the game, because it wanted to capture the competitive players of Smash Bros. Or other platform fighters. See, just by initial things, the competitive scene or the competitive player base will always be the smallest percent of a game. So, when you have your eyes set on trying to capture something that they like so that they can play your game, you are casting your net in a very, very small area, hoping to get as much as possible. And sure, some people, you will catch some people, but you are capturing the niche of a niche, which definitely narrows your scope. And then on top of that, with all the push for competitive play in Rivals of Aether, since it's kind of like the only thing you can do, not all the competitive players that you grabbed will play this game competitively. Some people just like to play games, and if they do go competitive, great. But if they want to just stay casual with your game, well, Rivals of Aether doesn't have too many things to keep those players entertained. You should never do this on purpose, but I see how it can be done when making a fighting game. Because when you want to make a fighting game, you want to first laser focus in on how the moment to moment gameplay feels of a fighting game, which is mostly going to be spent in versus mode. You want to make sure that the fighting in the fighting game is tuned and refined as much as possible before continuing in other areas, which, definitely get that. And especially for an independent developer or an indie game, you want to make sure you got that down pat, and you might not have all the resources or funding to do other things. So I see how something like that may happen. And I'm also trying not to say that it's the only thing Rivals have done. I'm not saying that they never did anything for the casual side. They have modes like Tetherball, and they have the Abyss mode, which if you know anything about this channel, Abyss mode is my very favorite mode in Rivals of Aether. So much so that I even created a YouTube series on it. And if you're wondering about that series, I am going to finish it before the end of the year. Trust me on that. I am sorry that I've been away for quite a while. Anyway, it's just those different methods of playing the game is really, really key in just having a robust game, especially a platform fighter. Since the reason most people played Smash Bros. As a young kid wasn't to be the best at their local scene. Heck, a lot of people didn't know there was even tournaments for the game. The reason people had their most fun playing Smash Bros. is because how sandboxy and open it was. If you ever got tired of playing, let's say, 1v1 on a Final Destination, you could change it up. You can choose different stages. You can put on some items. You can just make up your own rules with your different sets of items, or even just go to stamina mode and just play the game in different ways. There's just so many options for you to play the game any way you want. And that is missing in the majority of all other platform fighters. And it's kind of why Smash Bros. Still has the crown when it comes to the casual market. And also, it's the reason why I bet so many people have stories playing Smash Brothers and having fun. It's probably playing like different little modes. I even had a mode in playing in Brawl where it was super sudden death. Everyone spawns in on Temple with one stamina point, and Fox and Falco were banned. So, that actually leads to a lot of fun because it is fun. The game is supposed to be fun. That's why we play games. So with Rivals of Aether, they didn't have all those robust modes. I'm not forcing them to. I'm not saying that they have to have it. They are a indie game, so they had what they had. But over the years with the updates, there wasn't really more to add for casual players. And I definitely understand that. Those modes take a lot of time, a lot of thinking, and a lot of resources. So, with having a fresh start with Rivals 2, I do hope that they do consider those things when coming into this, and not the game isn't just let's play versus mode on a quote unquote competitive stage and just keep it like that. Honestly, I do hope Abyss mode makes a return to Rivals 2. I'm a little iffy on it when they started talking about Rivals 2 and how not even the full original cast of Rivals 1 was going to be playable on launch for Rivals 2. So, I'm not sure how many cuts they're going to do just to launch the game, and we'll see what they add in over time. But I do hope modes like that were considered because I really, really do love Abyss mode. That is the biggest mistake that I feel like Rivals of Aether made. All the other mistakes that they made at its inception, they either fixed or made it lesser to the best of their abilities. Like, add in better online play, as much as they could. And with Rivals of Aether 2, they are just promising that it's going to be rollback netcode with the people that they're working with. They've added extra modes. They've added more characters. These are just things people wanted more of in its inception that they soon always solved. So, like I said, biggest thing I feel like is they had too much of a scope for competitive play, just the quote-unquote 1v1 versus, and they should definitely make sure that their net is wider when it comes to Rivals 2, especially if they want to branch out even further and further beyond. So, let's stop looking at the past and let's actually get on to Rivals of Aether 2. Let's get on to Rivals 2. So, what do we know so far? What have we seen? How has the game changed? Well, for starters, they really, and I mean really, are coming for that crown that Smash Brothers has. Their gameplay now is going to be more similar to Smash Brothers than Rivals of Aether 1 was. They have added in shields. They have added in ledge mechanics. They have also, went the melee route and added in ledge hogging. And, they have all the different wave dashing and all that stuff. Just all that mixture and combined, they're making themselves more similar to Smash Brothers, to the point where they can be in direct comparison if they wasn't already. Some might say this is a bad thing. Some might say this is a good thing. But the fact of the matter is, that was actually one of its biggest criticisms on Rivals of Aether. Some people didn't like it because it was so different from Smash Brothers. As in, they didn't have their shields and they didn't have their ledges. That was the reason people didn't play the game. They would say, well, if this game had shields, if this had ledges, I'll play. Well, it looks like Dan had went ahead and solved that. They also, let's say, another criticism was a lot of people didn't like the 2D sprites. Well, now the game is fully fledged 3D. So there's 3D models on the characters. So, it will increase your visibility because some people said they had visibility troubles to seeing what was going on because everything was 2D. So they solved that as well. Some people in general just didn't like how cheap it looked. Well, they definitely updated the visuals. This looks like a pristine game now. So that is just the main criticisms of why some people say they didn't play the game. That was one thing they changed. Now it plays similar to Smash Brothers. Now it looks really good. No more 2D sprites, now 3D models. In my opinion, I am just a little bit sad that they did that, but I do understand. I felt like it gave the game a breath of uniqueness on how it used parries. Now, note, parrying is still in Rivals 2. It's an option when you're shielding, but to me, the use cases are just going to be different. As in, instead of it being your only defensive option, it is just an extra option. So, everything should be hunky-dory now. Well, not to me. I still see just some makings of things that could go wrong. So, let's talk about the first thing. Well, if it's so similar to Smash Brothers, why not just play Smash Brothers? Well, that's because at this time, the latest Smash Brothers, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, has ended its development cycle. So it's not really getting any more changes at this point on. The game is as the game is and is going to be for the rest of history and time. And by the release cycle of Smash Brothers, it's usually one per Nintendo console. So unless there's a new Switch, which, there's rumors that there's going to be one on the horizon, it's not going to be likely that there's going to be a new release of a Smash Brothers. And even if there is a new release of Smash Brothers, Masahiro Sakurai has stepped down from being the head developer of Smash Brothers. And a lot of people could say, he made the series. So if they came out with a new one, it was most likely going to be on a new Nintendo console. Let's call it the Switch 2. And then it's most likely going to be spearheaded by a different developer. So, a lot of people might say maybe Smash Bros. Is the way it is because of Sakurai. Maybe it will be way different to the point they don't like it if someone else did it. Maybe it'll be better. Maybe it might not happen at all because the roster of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is massive. So if they made a new one, they'll either have to keep the roster and keep going bigger, or some cuts will have to be made. And if they make cuts, why not just reboot it all the way back down to maybe a base 25 or 30 characters? And, that's just a lot of what ifs and happenstance and yada, yada, yada versus Rivals 2, a game that's already in development and we already know what we're expecting and for the most part, we know what we're getting. So, one of them's a safe bet, the other one's just a hope and a dream. Probably another reason to get Rivals of Aether or Rivals 2 versus Smash Brothers is developer support. And now I'm not only talking about the competitive scene, but I'm actually talking about just asking for changes. Nintendo was notorious for not listening to its community for any type of changes, actually. So now that we have a developer that we can just, let's say, message on social media and they will give you a response and maybe even change something. Some people will see this as a bad thing. It could be a good thing. But either way, we know that change is very, very possible. We can just ask for something to be changed if something is a problem. And if something is a big enough problem, the change for it won't come in a few months. It will probably come in a few weeks, if not days. That is a great thing to have for your game. And let's be frank, I am not the biggest fan of how Nintendo handles their communication to their players and such. So, and I believe the whole internet isn't either. As many mistakes and fumbles that they did with not only their Smash Brothers series, just to be frank, Nintendo has fumbled a lot of bags. Smash Brothers can be a tier 1 and not only a tier 1 esport, one of the most known games probably ever. It pretty much sells like it is cuz it virtually is one of the most known games. It sells so much. But the thing is, they can be doing more to make more money from it and enrich their player base with it. But they're not. They are fumbling left and right. So if any other company sees what they're doing and can make a few different changes and improve on what Nintendo is fumbling, they could just come out with a better game. I mean, just look at what happened with PUBG and Fortnite. When you're visually seeing people fumble bags, and you can just say, we can do that, but let's just correct the mistakes that the other guys are not doing, you can just come out on top with a better game, and you just force your competition to either improve or get left behind. So Rivals 2 is in prime position to actually go for the crown. They are just going to go for the throne and become the best platform fighter. It is very, very possible, and it is within their grasp. They just have to not fumble it and not make as many mistakes. Because to be completely honest with you, everyone is kind of, since there's no new updates for the new Smash Brothers game or even the older Smash Brothers game like Melee, seeing a game as notable as Rivals get a sequel, for the first month, everyone's going to be playing it just to see how it feels, just to see, what's what. Maybe they would even take a liking to it. And if there's developer support from the start, some of those people who play Smash Brothers for money, they might find out, hey, we can make more money by playing Rivals of Aether. These tournaments that try to host Nintendo games and, try to host Smash Brothers and is getting shut down or is not getting direct developer support or developer help or even developer communication, if they just host Rivals 2, they can just get all those things. There can be that support. There can be that communication. Soon enough, those games will just take over. Rivals 2 is in a prime position to do that. Hey, next, let's talk about characters. As mentioned earlier in the video, Dan had stated that the roster of characters in the launch roster of Rivals 2 will not be the same as the current roster of Rivals of Aether. So that means on launch, they are most likely not going to have every single character that is in the roster for Rivals of Aether 2. Okay, understandable. But how many characters are they going to have at launch? And are they going to have any new ones? The only truly new character that we know that's going to be in Rivals 2 is Fleet, who is from Dungeons of Aether, which is great that, Rivals of is that Aether Studios is grabbing other characters from their other games and their other medias, which, I would want them to do. It is like what you would probably think to do as the smartest decision. But they are saying that not all the characters are going to return at launch. How many characters is going to be there? Since it was an initial criticism of a low roster count for Rivals of Aether. Well, me personally, I do understand that, they are in a new engine. So basically, they're starting everything from scratch. So basically, every single character that is being made, whether they're returning or not, is basically being made on the same template of a new character. Since, they all need new models, new animation. And, have to make sure all their moves that they previously had work, not including all the new mechanics and even giving them new moves. And, with that said, are they going to just revamp anyone's movesets that they didn't think really worked in Rivals of Aether, or probably doesn't work with the new system mechanics with shielding and ledges? It's just all that just taken into account. Basically, every single character that they do make is going to be quote unquote new. So it's understandable that they won't have the full roster of, let's say, 16 at the launch. But we have to think, who is going to return now? I can just assume that everyone who was initially in Rivals of Aether is going to make a return. However, what about the new characters? It's a new game. Smash 64 to Melee, they added new characters, at least 10. So are we going to get a mess of new characters for Rivals 2? Is it going to be slowly cooked? I mean, they're currently hosting a contest on Rivals of Aether's workshop, where if you create a new workshop character and let's say it's really liked by everyone and the developers, and you win their contest, that character will be a new character in Rivals 2. No matter how you feel about that, they want to add new characters, but it doesn't seem like they just have a whole list of different types of characters to add, or like a whole slew of new character concepts just to add. And even if they do have that concept list, maybe it's not fully fleshed out concepts. But at the end of the day, people do want new characters. We've only got confirmed one new character to the Rivals of to the fighting game at launch, with a confirmed of several cuts. So it leaves them in a weird position where one of people's criticisms was their roster size, and it looks like for the launch they're going to be slashing their roster size and probably, going to come out with them later in DLCs and such and such. That is, if they make those characters return at all. I mean, like, let's just say, Rivals 1 or Rivals of Aether. Yeah, Rivals 1. Rivals 1 had 2 guest characters on the roster, Ori and Shovel Knight. Well, most likely the way, guest characters go, you're not going to get those characters back in the sequels. Unless, the Yacht Club and Moon Studios just says, hey, have them again? Sure. But let's just go on the assumption that we're not going to get them back. Well, those characters had a player base. What Aether Studios can do is they can just make new characters with those functions of Shovel Knight and the function of Ori. That would be cool. And, that would definitely satiate that playstyle that people won't go missing. And technically, that would be a new character. Well, what next? Personally, I would say, let's not forget about the casual players. Let's go the route where we give the casuals something to do outside of just flat versus mode. What if you have 4 friends together? You should be able to do something that's just not fight each other. Maybe, let's say, Abyss mode gets back. I hope so. They said, not all characters are returning. I really still hope Abyss mode returns. Because maybe you're alone. Maybe you're playing by yourself. Does the game have any good things for single player modes? That's just not arcade mode. Arcade is, pretty standard in a lot of fighting games, but I feel like it's kind of played out at this point. No one's gonna buy a game just to play arcade mode for, let's say, 15-20 minutes and then just call it a day. Is there anything to satiate people who likes to play the game by themselves? Is there any single player offering? If there's not, maybe that should be something, that should be there. Maybe there should be multiplayer offerings that are just not versus mode. Maybe they're tired of survival mode. Maybe they want to spice things up. Is there enough options to spice things up like there is in Smash Bros? Can you create your own custom modes with your own custom rules that you could just play? and just have fun with. That would be something, to look into. Now, I am not telling all platform fighters that they need to add items to their game. Items take a long time and a lot of forethought to, just throw in a game. And, if you're just going to copy Smash Bros. Items, sure. But, when it comes to items and their item lists, it's not always that easy. But these things should be thought of. Can someone have fun with your game if they do not have an internet connection? Can someone have fun with your game if they have 6 people with them? Can someone have fun with the game if they are by themselves and don't want to play online? Is all your fun modes online capable? Like at the start of Rivals 1, they did have Abyss mode. Well, technically they did not have Abyss mode at the launch, but when Abyss mode was a thing, it was local only. Well, what about the online players? It didn't become online capable until way, way later. So are all these modes that I'm saying, with different wacky ways to play or making your own rules, is there an option to use that online? Is there an option to have an online lobby that you can just set the rules this way and everyone can just have fun? These are things that need to be thought of to make sure that they capture the casual market, which I'm not saying these things are easy or just a flip of the switch. These things need forethought, but I hope that they were thinking about this, because Rivals 1 did not have a lot of these offerings, to the point where a lot of people I know don't play Rivals because there's not a lot of fun offerings aside from 1v1ing each other. And that does get old, especially if the skill gap between you and your friend is great. Okay, let's see. Let me flip a coin. What I'm going to talk about next. Oh, okay. Let's get monetization out the way. So, games nowadays, they need to make money so they can live and so they can continue making money. And, let's just say under the right circumstances, if the game makes money, we get more game. Okay? So right now, as of me speaking, we do not know the purchase model of Rivals 2. We do not know if it's going to be free to play or it's going to be just a flat pay fee, or maybe there is a free version of the game with a paid version of the full game. We don't know. They're still deciding it internally, so we don't know. So let's ponder for a few seconds. How do we monetize a platform fighter? Well, let's just keep it simple and let's just think of Smash Bros. Smash Brothers, they have the room to do more things, as in, let's say, cosmetics. There's a lot of different outfits or different character alts or model swaps that people would love to go over certain characters or people would love to have. People know this. I mean, just look at some of the cool different alt costumes and colors that people mod in or make, whether it's Melee or Smash Ultimate. What if you was able to just have that in game? Well, let's create a shop. Let's just create a shop where you can buy these cosmetics. I mean, Rivals 1 is no stranger to this. When it comes to big events and different stuff, they usually make different alt costumes or different alt colors, since they was dealing with sprites in Rivals 1, that would commemorate certain tournament events or events and tournament series, and even at times tournament winners that was purchasable, that you can just buy and have it. And they usually just come with a little extra flair. Well, The main issue and the main alleviation that's going to happen with switching over from 2D sprites to 3D models, you can do more with that. As in, it's not going to take so long. Because currently, what you would have to do for a 2D sprite to have an alt color or a costume, you would have to either change every frame of animation for every frame of animation that character has, or just go through a specific color changer. So, it will look different in every single pose that they have. And then on top of that, Rivals 1 just added a little cherry on top, which gives them new taunts or makes some of their summonable items just look different. But those things take work. They take a new sprite, each of them. Now that's going to be simpler in Rivals 2 because they're working with 3D models. And it's way simpler to just change something on a model than completely change every frame of animation on sprites. So I can expect that we would probably get more things. I mean, heck, Rivals 1 have these seasonal colors. Like, okay, here's just a random idea. I'm just going to throw this out. Feel free to steal this. I do not care. In Rivals 1, there's seasonal colors with, let's say there's summer colors that every character gets a summer outfit or summer color alt. When they spawn in, they have a cute little summer item on top of their player model. But the second that they move or the second that they get hit, that little thing falls off. Whether it's glasses or a surfboard or anything like that, it just falls off. Well, with models, you can just attach that piece to the model. So if Zetterburn spawns in with sunglasses, you can just attach that to his model for that alt, and it will just be on him. And that's just cool. And just for an extra idea, during these seasonal colors and stuff, why not make them for purchase, just in case someone really likes them and wants to use them all year round? Saying maybe, let's say they cost $2.99, and you can just have this color alt. And then, people will be like, especially me, saying, oh, why am I just paying for a color? Well, let's just say you give them another way to unlock them. What if you complete 20 games with this character alt color? Like you just complete 20 games, then you would unlock it without paying the $2.99. And this will be great. Let's just say the game has a roster of 10 characters. Usually everyone gets a seasonal color alt. Well, if you complete 20 games with each alt, you'll just have it. But if you don't have time for that and you just don't want to do that with every character, you don't have to do it for every character, or you can just spend the $2.99. I don't think 20 games is a lot to complete, but okay, let's just say it is. Let's just shorten it down to 15 games each. Or yeah, that sounds reasonable. Just complete 15 games with each color alt and it will be yours. This will be a cool way to have seasonal items. And, on top of that, just make more cosmetics. Maybe if it's a whole model swap, say it will cost $5. But if it's just a color change, make it cost $2. Stuff like that. That would be cool, and that would be an easy way to just fund the monetization. And just really simple. If they had that in Smash Brothers will make a lot more money. I mean, me costumes make quite a bit of money. I would assume, I don't have the numbers or the figures, but I would assume that they make money. And that is just an easy way to have a cash revenue stream. Rivals 1 has already did this and it's proven to work. And they use that money to help fund their competitive scenes. So you can just help fund more development and just their competitive scenes just by having different cosmetics that you can unlock or that you can just straight up buy. That would be cool, and that would be an easy monetization. Obviously, you could probably do more with monetization, but I'm just just keeping it simple. I'm not really trying to say every little thing that you could do, like how they had the little following buddies with you and stuff. Oh, and also if you're doing this, make sure that if you have another tournament mode, that every single cosmetic is unlocked. So if you do have your tournaments in real life, people can use these cool colors and stuff. I've spoken about this on previous videos when talking about Street Fighter, but I don't see why people just don't do that. Make it, when you turn on tournament mode, just unlock everything that was ever purchased so that, in a tournament, people can get all the cool colors and stuff so they can play with it. But, when they're home and stuff and want to play online, they'll have to make sure that they buy or unlock these things themselves so they can just have it have it 24/7. It's a simple thing. All right, last thing. Let's talk about story. Let's talk about lore. Let's talk about giving these characters reason and background. Because Rivals, they dip their toe into this, but they're very, very wishy-washy on it, and I don't know why. So, as a giant fan of the Aether products, I guess, I can't just call it Rivals products, of the Aether products, I care about story. I know I am not the only one that cares about story and about lore, especially when it comes to these characters. I've grown an attachment to these characters, but it seems like that same attachment is not, let's just say, shared fully by the writing team, if there is a writing team. This is a fighting game. They want to make sure they get the fighting done. They mostly care about the fighting. But they have been dropping hints and alluding to a story and some lore for these characters. However, not every character is getting the same amount of love or acknowledgement. And that is sort of weird. Because when you make a game and you just put in a lot of cool looking, attractive characters that people love their design, people gonna probably want to know their story. And when your story is, I don't know, that's not the best look. You can see this with the comparison of Overwatch and League of Legends. Overwatch has a lot of cool looking characters. They do not flesh out their stories. We just get a lot of surface level things of what these characters are, but the story's not there. It seems like they're not focused on story at all. And that's kind of weird to do when people is really dying to see a story with these characters, whether it is a story mode or just more lore and more animations about these characters so we can see how they are, know who they are, and see how they interact with other people on their team or around them. League of Legends, on the other hand, you see a cool looking champion, there is probably a page worth of story for them, considering they're not old, like really old. And even then, they still have story. And it seems like League of Legends does care because a lot of these older champions are getting their stories redone. They're getting it redid for modern day because it seems like they did start taking a care. And people have been making a lot of content on these stories. Like, I don't even play League of Legends. I'm not a fan of League of Legends. I think Arcane is really cool. I'm excited for Project L. And I have my favorite characters like Ornn and Aurelion Sol, even though I have never touched the game. Because I just look up their lore. I look up things they can do. I look up like what happened to them. And that just got me intrigued in just those characters where I would buy their merch without even ever like loading up a Riot account. And that's just the power that you can have. And that is the power that Rival has in its hands, but is not using to the best of abilities. Like right now, what we know from stories is like we know Zeta Burn and Forrest Burns are brothers. We know that Forrest Burn is an adopted brother. And we know that Forrest Burn is blamed for patricide. So, he got exiled, and now there's probably a feud in between them. But that's it. We don't know anything else because there is no story in Rivals of Aether. There is no story we can look to. I guess, Crag is a wall attendant. He attends to the wall. Maple just lives in the forest. And it's just, these little things are very surface level, and we're not getting any more. Now, I probably hear what you're probably saying. Well, we got extra stuff, like for Clarine. She had got her own comic, which, awesome. She did get a comic. And the thing, what I don't like about that is going outside the medium what the game is. And I'm not saying it can never be done. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. I, love the comic myself. But the fact that if people want these lores, that you have to tell them, oh, you have to go do homework, as in go outside the game, go to the wiki, go buy a comic. That's not the best thing to do. That's not so good. That's kind of how like Destiny did it for a time, saying, oh, if you want lore, you have to go outside the game. Put the lore inside the game. This is something that Smash Bros. Does not have to tangle with, because at the end of the day, Smash Bros. Is a crossover game. In crossover properties, the point of them is just to see these already established characters from different franchises just coming together and interacting with each other in a mostly non-canon way. So, it could be cool, especially, with different depictions of characters. Like, no one is going to say that the Bowser in Smash Bros. Is the same Bowser that plays golf and goes around in go-karts with Mario, because they look and act completely different, but it's just still cool. So when you make original characters and they look this good and act a certain way, people is going to want to know who they are. And it would behoove you to make stories for these characters. Right now, with little to nothing, a lot of people make their own stories and make their own headcanons. You're leaving everything on the table and leaving everything open-ended, where people are making their own headcanons and making their own fan interpretations. And they don't have to. And it's shown that Aether Studios does kind of care, or does give a sense of caring, the fact that they went out and actually made a comic. I'm not sure if they're going to make more comics, or I'm not sure if the comic did well enough to justify them making more comics. But if they have a story to tell, or if you want to tell a story, now is the time to actually clarify things. Because not everyone in the original roster of Rivals of Aether had got a arcade mode that gave them a surface level story. No one really knows what's up with Daedalus or Absa. No one really, knows how deep the hatred of Sylvanos goes. Nobody really knows what is Zetterburn up to. But the thing is, they give little bits and pieces here and there. And it would just help if they just sit down and just find out, all right, who are these characters? What do they do? And who are they fighting? Because it seems like the four nations, or the four elements of Aether, does have quarrels with each other. And the thing is, with the quarrels of each other's, it looks like there's not only just a main four elements in the world of Aether. There's splintered factions, like the Smoke faction that had basically adopted Forsburn after he was exiled from the fire. Now he fights with Smoke. Is Smoke more fire or more air? Is it a combination? We have Ice, which is Daedalus. Daedalus is in the water faction. Then we have Poison with Rano. And then on top of that, who is Rano? Rano is known as the Poison Pacifist. However, from every depiction, he's always fighting. Is he always, is the Poison Pacifist just a false title? Is he just really just a fighter? Did something happen that made him break his vow of pacifism? So now he fights when he used to didn't fight before? Or do we call using poison non-lethal when it, looks pretty lethal because he poisons people? Like, and what kind of monk is he? Why are there monks? There are statues of different monks. Who are they? And there is, they're trying to tell some kind of story, because even playing Dungeons of Aether, you can find out more lore about not only Jules Vale, but when it comes to the world, like in total. And can we make sure that it gets in game? And can we make sure that there is just like a way for people to consume the story? Because, on top of that, tell you the truth, I don't even know if there's any like bad guys in the Aether roster. I guess the only bad guys we can point to is Sylvanos and maybe Eliana, but the way they're bad guys is that Eliana had got wronged by the Air Armada, so now she had stole a mech and she's mad at them and wants to take down the whole Air Armada. It, definitely a bad guy, but it seems like more of a bad guy of the week than a world-ending threat. Not that there needs to be a world-ending threat, but then we also have Sylvanos, who's more of a, I guess, spirit or a force of nature, who I guess is the forest or protects the forest and is kind of he seems more of a, if you litter in the forest, he'll murder you, which, since we're not sure if he is a person at all and more of a first force of nature, it's kind of hard to label him as evil, because it's kind of like labeling a hurricane as evil. And then his intentions is to, I guess, preserve the forest, or maybe make the forest go back to what it was, and, without the meddling of other people and stuff. And maybe, his first thought is to just kill people in the forest. Like, we don't know. And then on top of that, the abyss itself, the abyss that shoots out the dark clouds and the purplish darkness that, just spreads between the land, and the corruption. That is another thing as well. Like, what is the abyss? Is it just a dark thing that's in all the way deep in the Earth's core that shouldn't be touched, that was once sealed away, that is now here and is just here to give dark powers? Is it some kind of hidden fifth element on top of all the different splintering factions of the first four? And then, especially in Clarion's comic, the world has enough of its own issues with all the different factions fighting on top of that. I mean, even the fire armada, but basically the fire people is this big old imperialist faction that it just goes around and it just colonizes places. They're looking to expand their empire. And it's like, is Daedalus a part of that now that he is in charge because his father got killed and he's next in line? Is Daedalus cool? I mean, not Daedalus. Is Zetterburn a part of that? Is Zetterburn cool with that? Is he not? Well, what about Artemis? It seems like she's gung-ho for the colonization and the spread. But then again, at the end of Dungeons of Aether, it looks like she was having a change of heart. Is she no longer going to be on the imperialist side? Is she not about that? Does she look at something else? Like, she doesn't look like someone who changes her mind really quickly. So is something bigger that changed her mind? Like, and even if it is, who does she side with? Is she going to side with someone else? Is she just going to remain a imperialist threat? And, just there's so much that can be done. And I feel like Rivals 2 is the time to maybe establish more lore, or it's just establish everything all at, well, it doesn't even have to be all at once. The thing is, you have chances of do-overs. You can just rewrite something or redo something. It might not have been, your most focused area at first because fighting game, But now that you have a second shot, you can just do more. There can be a story mode. You can actually, try to tell the story you're trying to tell, or, in this big story that you're trying to tell, introduce more characters so that you can just naturally add onto the roster. And the way you do that is by taking time, taking care, and just trying to just flesh these characters out. The more you do that, the more people will love these characters. The more people love these characters, they will play the games. The more they'll buy these merches. It's not gonna be easy, but the thing is, there is time for that to be tried. Probably not in the window of your 2024 release, but these things should not go like to the wayside. These things should be thought about. And even if everything is not there at launch, it should just be updated with these things. And it should just come out slowly and slowly. That will make Aether Studios and all the Aether games just solidify itself more and more. Another media franchise. I think that's all I got. There's a lot of things that they can do that their competition is not. And there's a lot of places that they can learn from where Smash Bros. Fumbled, where other games has fumbled, and where that they have a dedicated audience now, which is more than what a lot of other platform fighters can say. And this is a big chance for them to take over and go for the crown and become the platform fighter. They just have to do it right, especially when it comes to multi-platform, because Rivals 1 tried that multi-platform release, but it looks like they wasn't ready for it. They tried releasing on Xbox, but it seems like that port basically got no love. And then, they released it on Switch, which, fine, since, it was in tournaments anyway. But it seems like they just continue to stick with the PC ports. But anywho, those were my thoughts on the upcoming Rivals 2. I'm very excited. I hope they do the things right. And I hope maybe one of the people from Aether Studios heard this video. I'm like, if you listen to me ramble the whole way through, I would have to say my deepest thank you and my deepest apologies that you just had heard me say that. All this stuff, just ramble for, let me see, an hour. Wow. Okay, let me end this video. Thank you all for listening. I do hope things are going to be done right. I will be there at launch with Rivals 2, and you will see more content on this channel about Rivals 2. You all have a great day. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.